The Pulitzer Prize-winning American journalist and former managing editor of the Wall Street Journal, Karen Elliott House. Well, as well as having spent decades covering the Middle East, Karen has just written a new book entitled The Man Who Would Be King. It is a portrait of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Well, the book goes on sale next month, and its release comes at a time of profound transformation in the region, with Saudi Arabia positioned very much at the heart of it all. We're going to be exploring this growing global role for Saudi Arabia and the ambitions driving the man who would be king. I'd like to read a little excerpt from your book in which you describe the first encounter at the Arka Palace. You say he was wearing a loose brown robe without a bisht or a shamar, revealing his dark hair carefully combed back. You go on to say he is a young man who does not need the trappings of power or royal pomp because he possesses the essence of true power. And there we can see a clip of that on the screens in front of us. So Karen, at that first conversation with the Crown Prince, and as it unfolded, what was going through your mind and what was the first impression you started to draw of the Crown Prince in that first meeting?
Well, as I said, I was struck by several things. His informality. He wasn't sort of puffed up on me important to you down there. He just talked. You asked a question, he gave an answer. He seemed to be, I do regard him as a marketer, someone who is constantly, if you will, selling Saudi Arabia. He clearly has the pride in his country, and he explains a little history, but then he answers whatever question you're asking. He went through a lot of things. I mean, he was saying at that time, he was, a lot of people were calling him Mr. Everything. And he kept insisting, I'm not a one-man show. I'm part of a group that is trying to advance the interest of Saudi Arabia. But mostly it was just, I was struck by how easy it was to talk to him. He spoke the first time in Arabic, but he constantly corrected the translator, so he clearly, his English was good, mostly corrected him on numbers. And, you know, he just, he was very comfortable in his own skin, as we Americans say.
Okay, and you say the encounter was informal. I mean, did it get less formal, perhaps as you both sort of got to know each other a little bit over these 6 different encounters? And just an aside, what did you actually call him?
I call him Your Royal Highness, but, you know, I mean, yeah, my point is, even in that first interview, I felt very comfortable asking him questions about now versus the way things used to be. I mean, he probably did get slightly more informal. I think the last time I saw him, not too long ago, he said, you know, I walked into his office and he said, long time no see, shook hands, and then pointed at my abaya and said, you know, you don't have to wear that. And I said, yes, and sat down and went straight into my questioning, because I find wearing an abaya an easy thing to do. I did not do it when I first went to Saudi Arabia. I wore normal American clothes, and in 1978, that was fine. By 1980, someone in Prince Turki's office, who was then the head of intelligence, said to me, I can't drive you home to your hotel if you don't wear this. And he gave me one of those big silk abayas and a scarf to cover my head and face with. So I've worn an abaya ever since. I don't cover my head unless I'm ordered to by the religious police or by a religious judge I saw.
So you've seen sort of two transformations of Saudi Arabia, it seems.
Yeah.
One in your first visit in 1978, when perhaps things were less conservative, then a more conservative country. And now you're saying you're seeing again a country that's perhaps modernized some of the attitudes. And I want to ask you, because I mean you've mentioned history more than once, and you've said in your book as well that the Crown Prince has a keen interest in history. And I'm just wondering how that came across in your conversations with him. I mean, did he draw on historical examples? Did he give you a brief potted history of Saudi Arabia? How did that come across?
Well, he talks about, more the history of Saudi Arabia, although he will refer to the prophet, or what religion does require or doesn't require, but it's more talking about the history of Saudi Arabia. And, when I ask him, I'm intrigued that by the fact that he's so young and powerful, and comparing that to other young rulers in history like Peter the Great or Julius Caesar's son, Caesar Augustus, who ruled Rome for more than 40 years. And I asked him, once the Caesar Augustus was asked, what do you want your epitaph to be? And he said, I found Rome in clay and I left it in marble. And so I said to the Crown Prince, what would you like yours to be? And, he was not scared off by the question, or, he seemed to certainly know who Caesar Augustus was. And, he said, I found Saudi, I don't remember his exact words, but basically he wasn't as grandiose on his accomplishments as Caesar Augustus. He said, I found Saudi Arabia in essence good shape, and I left it in better working with other people. I mean, he seems constantly to try to make the point that he is working with a team and not being just me, myself, and I.
You mention in the book that, and this helps to sort of set the scene and try to imagine what it was like. I'm assuming your meetings took place in his office, because you talk about a desk stacked up with paperwork. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you mentioned that.
A lot of people have offices, and he has an office.
Okay, so he's got this office, and you say that there's a lot of paperwork on the desk in your book. And I'm wondering if you mentioned that because it surprised you, because, we think of the Crown Prince as being tech savvy. He's also a millennial. He's not quite 40. And therefore, I wonder if you expected him to be a bit more digital and paperless than, in fact, he was.
Yeah, I was just impressed that, as I wrote in my book, the only thing between me and him is all the paper on. It's actually his coffee table that he had a pile of papers on. He has them on his desk too, but he had this pile of papers, and he said he reads on paper because you can digest it better. Which surprised me, because he's infamous for keeping the key performance indicators of ministers on his iPad and tracking them. So, and he's talks about playing video games. He's clearly very digital.
Yeah.
But
that's certainly the reputation he has. And as I was saying, not quite 40. I believe his 40th birthday is in August.
He's 39. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Just a couple of months shy of 40. And in your book, you say that the Crown Prince is both pragmatic and ambitious. And I'm wondering if that came across as a constant and consistent theme across all your encounters with him.
Pragmatic and ambitious. Yeah, I think I would say my primary word for him is he is driven. I think he's constantly trying to channel his drivenness into pragmatic things. What can I actually achieve? And one of the things I recount in the book is he wanted to deal with the economic troubles that the kingdom faced when his father and he took over. And one of them was a big budget deficit. And he wanted to reduce benefits. The country had a lot of so-called benefits that government workers got, a benefit for typing or computer expertise or things like that, so that they got more money without putting it in their base salary. And he cut those benefits, which cut the income to people significantly, because his staff apparently told him it'll take some years to really figure out how to target those benefit cuts. And so he said, I'm going to cut the deficit. I'm going to focus on what I can do. That subsequently got reversed, but his father restored the benefits. But to me, the important thing is his view is that if you face a problem, tackle it. Dallying will only make it worse. So somebody advised me this when I became publisher of the journal: if you come to a fork in the road and you don't know what to do, take one, because if you have any intelligence and you're wrong, you'll run back and take the other. If you just stand there at the fork and suck your thumb, you're in big trouble. And I think that's his view. You've got to act, not thoughtlessly act, but if you don't have all the data you need, you have to do the best you can. He's very data-driven.
We have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first.
For in-depth analysis and all the latest developments across the globe, make sure you join us every weekday.
President Trump is trying to negotiate a ceasefire.
With so much happening, so much information, and so much noise,
international law will have no part in his administration.
it can be hard to keep track.
Tariffs will just fuel inflation.
We're going to fight these tariffs.
But you can count on us to tell you what you need to know.
We stand by your side.
Join me, Tom Burges Watson, for Global News Today, right here on Al Arabiya News. Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's program, we'll bring you the latest as Israeli forces intercept an aid ship with pro-Palestinian activists aboard, amongst them the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. Well, that Freedom Flotilla, which was carrying a small quantity of humanitarian aid, was headed to the Gaza Strip. We're also going to be speaking to a top US surgeon who's been to Gaza twice to try and save lives. Plus, we'll be speaking to Francesca Albanese, the UN's Special Rapporteur in the occupied Palestinian territories. That's an interview you don't want to miss. Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin with the latest on what happened in the early hours of this Monday morning when Israeli forces intercepted an aid boat that was headed for Gaza. Well, amongst those on board the Madeleine was the Swedish campaigner Greta Thunberg, who says the vessel was intercepted in international waters. Well, 12 people from 7 different countries were aboard that vessel. None are reported to have been injured. Well, the boat set sail from Italy at the start of the month as part of a bid to raise awareness about food shortages in Gaza. That's a place which, after 21 months of deadly violence, has been described by the UN as the hungriest place on earth. This is what Greta Thunberg said in a pre-recorded message.
My name is Greta Thunberg and I am from Sweden. If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has labelled those who took part in that self-styled Freedom Flotilla coalition as, quote, Hamas propaganda mouthpieces, and said that they are set to return to their home countries. Well, Katz added that the blockade of Gaza was necessary to prevent militants from acquiring weaponry. Well, our next guest is an American trauma surgeon who's worked extensively in Gaza. He addressed the UN Security Council meeting last week on what he saw while he was in Gaza, whilst working as a Med Global volunteer in Khan Yunis. Dr. Feroz Sidwa, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us from California. I just want to set the scene for our viewers. You have worked on 2 separate occasions in the emergency rooms of hospitals in southern Gaza, and you're quoted as saying the following: I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Israeli, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Arab. I have no connection to this conflict other than that I am an American. So let me start by asking you this. Why did you choose to work not once but twice in Gaza despite some very obvious dangers?
There's a few reasons, I guess. I've done a lot of international work as a surgeon. Thankfully, I've been lucky that way. I've worked in Ukraine, I've worked in Haiti, I've worked in other conflict areas. But Gaza is something quite different. And I've been involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict since I was 18. The Second Intifada broke out when I was in college. So it was just something that I ended up sticking with throughout my life. But, Gaza, the attack on healthcare in Gaza is something unique in history and literally in world history, as far as I can tell. And so I think that the fact that I provide some protection to my colleagues and to the hospitals when I'm there is a major reason that I go. But also just the need for a trauma surgeon there is tremendous. But really, it's to stand in solidarity with my colleagues who I know are just under direct attack.
What do you mean when you say you offer them some protection? What does that mean exactly?
Well, I mean, I know full well that the Israelis can kill me and get away with it, and the U.S. administration, Biden or Trump, doesn't really matter, just won't care. But nevertheless, it would be a media headache. And, I've written a New York Times article about Gaza. I've written a Politico article. I've been on CNN and ABC and things like that. So I have some mainstream credentials, if you will. And and it would be embarrassing for them to kill me. Honestly, they were about 2 minutes away from killing me on March 23rd. If I hadn't been pulled into the ICU, or if they had attacked Nasser. They bombed Nasser Medical Complex on March 23rd when I was there and killed one of my patients. But nevertheless, I think they would probably rather not kill me. So, maybe they used a smaller munition when they attacked the hospital. Maybe they, I don't know. But I think that I hope that my presence makes them more hesitant to attack the hospital that I'm working at when I'm there.
Of course, in the United States, as a trauma surgeon, you see suffering and blood quite often. I'm assuming you typically provide emergency surgery and critical care for people with serious injuries, people who perhaps had a car accident, a fall, a victim of violence. And as you say, you've volunteered in Ukraine, you volunteered in Africa. Have you ever seen anything like what you saw in Gaza?
No, Gaza is unique in a few ways. The most obvious way is just the number of children that are injured. Now, obviously, Gaza it's a half child population. Half of the people in Gaza are under 18, but nevertheless, the injuries to children are widespread, and it's extremely difficult to deal with them. That's one major way. The second way is that the healthcare system itself is just under direct attack. And like I said, there's no close parallel to that in history that I can think of. Every hospital in Gaza has been attacked. Every hospital in Gaza has been forcibly emptied. Every hospital in Gaza is starved of supplies. Something like 5% of the healthcare workforce has been killed, maybe more than that. It's hard to know exact numbers. the largest hospital in most third world countries have one large hospital that provides all of the advanced, the really first world level healthcare. In Gaza, that was Shifa Hospital, which basically doesn't exist anymore. It's now it used to be a 750 bed medical complex. So like it would have been the 7th biggest hospital in the state of California. It was a huge place. It had all sorts of advanced modalities of care, all sorts of international subspecialists walking around. It's just rubble now. There's a small emergency room that's functioning, and I think there's one operating room that they set up in a dentist's office. So, it just basically doesn't exist anymore, which means the biggest hospital now is Nasser. And Nasser is now basically the only functional hospital of any significance in the Gaza Strip, as far as I can tell. These things change day to day, unfortunately. But European hospital, where I was last year, is now an Israeli troop barracks. They're digging up the entire place, trying to find some tunnel that they can claim was under the hospital. Okay. So yes, that's another way. A third way is that the entire population is seriously malnourished, which makes surgery pretty difficult. I can cut anybody open, but if their body has no protein, if they don't have any access to nutrition, then it makes it very hard for them to heal anything. Fourthly, Gaza's entire population is homeless, like virtually all of it. Not only homeless, but displaced, and often displaced 10, 15, 20 times. So again, when you combine a child population that was half refugees, or actually more than half refugees, about 70% refugees before October 7th, all of them are now homeless and displaced. All of them are hungry to the point that people are actually dying of starvation. And it's also one of the most wounded populations in the world, with one of the most degraded healthcare systems in the world. You can see how it's a unique place.
Yeah, they're wounded physically, and you're quoted as saying they're wounded severely psychologically, and perhaps not surprising given what you've just said. And you're quoted as saying nearly half of the children in Gaza are suicidal. So essentially you're treating the physical wounds of children whose spirit has been broken. I mean, what sort of things did children say to you? What did their parents say to you to give this impression that so many of them are suicidal?
Yeah, just so people know, that's not my opinion. It's the findings of a group called the War Child Alliance that actually surveyed children in this regard. But it comports with my experience exactly, and it comports with almost everyone else's as well. Like I wrote an article for the New York Times when I came back from Gaza, where I surveyed 65 total healthcare workers, including me, about their experience in Gaza. And I forget, but I think it was all but one answered yes to the question. I saw nearly universal psychiatric distress amongst Gaza's children, including suicidality amongst young children. I'm pretty sure only, if I remember the numbers right, and I might not, so I apologize, but I'm pretty sure only one person said they didn't agree with that statement out of 65. So it's everybody who's been there sees the same thing. It's not just me, obviously, but yeah, no, the problem, not the problem, but one of the things that happens is that so many children these kids are killed mostly in explosions, right? And these explosions typically target their family homes, which is done on purpose. I should just point out it's public knowledge. It's not hidden. And when you're dropping munitions that are meant to destroy tank clusters and reinforced concrete bunkers and things like that onto the flimsiest civilian structures, or just onto tents, they have a devastating effect, and of course they kill everyone in a huge radius. So if this one child just happens to survive, he or she is just basically alone in the world. And of course they're severely injured. So like I remember a little boy, his last name was Barakat. I can't remember his first name now, but he was 5 years old, I believe. He had a broken arm with an external fixator. That's the pins that are on the outside with the metal bars to hold a bone in place. He had one on his right arm. He had one on his left arm as well. And both of his legs had been amputated at different levels. This 5-year-old kid. Now, his parents were actually alive, but from what I remember, all of his siblings were dead. And every day we were in his room. Of course, we're hurting him because we're examining him and trying to make sure he doesn't have infections in his amputation sites and things like that. But every day we're in his room, all he does is cry and ask his mom why he couldn't have died with his sister and his other sister and his brother and his other brother. And that's, That's pretty uncommon for children. Children don't typically contemplate death. I mean, again, like, I'm not talking about 17-and-a-half-year-old boys. That's different. Prepubescent children. I mean, I keep asking. I've yet to find a Westerner who's ever answers the question. Yes, I have met a suicidal 5-year-old before. That's just not common. And yeah, so the mental scars are very, very severe. And I don't know what kind of long-term effect they're going to have on people. I don't think anybody does, but it won't be positive, that's for sure.
And I can imagine this has been mentally scarring for you as well. I mean, what you've seen during your time there must be images that you're never going to forget. You'll be incapable of forgetting. But is there one image that haunts you, perhaps above all the others? Something in your mind that you'll simply never be able to erase?
Yeah, I mean, mentally, thankfully, I'm fine. It's my colleagues in Gaza that I really worry about the most. But no, there are some scenes that it's hard to put out of your mind for sure. The one that I still remember the best though is it just encapsulates so much about Gaza. There was, when I was at European Hospital last year, there was a nurse named Tomer. He was an orthopedic surgical nurse, so he had done quite well for himself. And I ended up finding his public Facebook page, so I learned a little bit about him. He was married, he had 2 children in Gaza City, and he worked in an Indonesian hospital as a surgical nurse. And so this productive young man who participated in research, took care of patients, participated in technical discussions about how to care for orthopedic injuries, which is not an easy thing, actually. It does require a high level of technical expertise. This guy was working at Indonesian hospital probably in late November of 2023, so a month and a half after the October 7th attacks, and he was in the OR. And when Israeli soldiers raided the hospital, and he was closing a wound on a patient because it was the end of the case, and they said, "You have to come with us." He said, I can't. I have to finish this operation, and then I can go with you. So they shot him in the knee, and they left him on the floor of the operating room. So his own colleagues came in, picked him up, and put an external fixator across his leg and put him in the ward of the hospital where he was recovering. The next day, the Israelis raided the hospital again and took him from his hospital bed. They took him most likely to Sid ATM, and nobody knows for sure, but most likely to this hellhole of a torture chamber that they have in the Negev desert. And they strapped him to a table for 45 days. They gave him a juice box to eat every day or every other day, and that was it, nothing else. They neglected him so badly that he lost about 50 pounds in 45 days, and he developed sepsis in his broken leg because they were just completely neglecting him, not giving him any medical treatment. And they beat him so badly during that time that his right eye was destroyed and had to be removed when he was let out. Eventually, they just dumped him naked on the side of a road probably near the Kerem Shalom crossing. And again, this is how most Palestinians are treated when they're released. And he just had to crawl on his butt for about a mile until some civilian picked him up and brought him to European Hospital, which is where I met him. And, me and Mark Perlmutter and the whole rest of our team, this is when I was with the first time with the Palestinian American Medical Association and the WHO. We were able to get him physically better. We were able to resolve his sepsis. We were able to find him some food to eat. So by the time we left, he was clinically stable. But mentally and spiritually, he's a completely broken human being. I mean, he doesn't know if his family is alive or dead. He has no way of finding out. He constantly screams out in terror and pain for no reason. He was actually evacuated to Egypt, thankfully, but he's so paranoid that he's paranoid that every nurse is an Israeli agent trying to kill him. So he won't let them treat him. In spending time with this man who, again, he was a productive member of his society. He certainly had nothing to do with any fighting or any militancy. That's why he was let go. He was just, literally shot while operating on somebody. And this is crazy. It's kind of hard to understand how this could improve anyone's security. It certainly doesn't improve Palestinian security, but it's hard to understand how it could improve Israeli security. And it's obviously not the goal here. So that kind of story it's hard to forget about, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, a horrific image. And actually that leads on to something I wanted to ask you, which is we're constantly being told, and we're constantly reading reports that quote the IDF is saying that hospitals in Gaza are these hotbeds of Hamas militants. There are tunnels underneath them. There are operation centers underneath them. Did you see anything, any evidence, any secret rooms, any areas you were told not to go to under any circumstances during your 2 stints in hospitals in Gaza?
No, and it's important to recognize that neither did anyone else. So me and 98 other American healthcare professionals wrote a letter to the Biden administration in October of last year. And in that, I forget the exact wording, but it says something like, not one of us ever saw anything approaching militarization of a hospital in Gaza. I personally have never seen a combatant or or even treated a combatant, to my knowledge, in Gaza, which is, I have to admit, is kind of surprising, but nevertheless seems to be true. And I just want people to understand, even suppose that Hamas did have a command and control center near or even under a hospital, under no possible understanding of the laws of war does that mean you can drop a bomb on a hospital. That is completely crazy. And everybody can see it if you just turn the belligerents around. So, for example, in December of last year, December of 2024, Benjamin Netanyahu had his prostate removed in a civilian hospital in Jerusalem. By every account, no one denies this. In fact, they were quite proud of it. By every account, he was running the war effort from his room the day after the operation. He stayed in the hospital for 4 days. So he absolutely militarized this hospital. He didn't dig a bunker underneath it. He just did it from his room. Does anyone think that Hamas could just get an airplane from China and drop a bomb on this civilian hospital because Benjamin Netanyahu has militarized it totally in contravention of international law? No. No one would accept that. That's insane. You don't drop bombs on hospitals. That's just a simple fact of life. Now, if somebody had removed all the patients and turned a building that's called a hospital into an arms factory, that would be a different thing, but nobody alleges any such thing is happening. They allege that Hamas is some guy, take March 23rd. I mentioned it before. On that day, the Israelis. I was at Nasser Medical Complex then. This is basically the biggest functional hospital in Gaza on the western side of Khan Yunis. There was a boy named Ibrahim Barhoum whom I had fixed him up a few days before on March 18th, and he was ready to go home the next morning. So at about 9 o'clock, I was going down to his room when the Israelis blew it up. They were trying to kill the other guy in the room, Ismail Barhoum. And so that's why I said I was about 2 minutes away from being killed there. But so they claimed that this was their claim. Now, this is March 23rd. Remember, until March 18th, just 5 days before, there was a ceasefire going on, right? The Israelis claimed that the guy they wanted to kill, whose name was Ismail Barhoum. Sorry, the boy's name was Ibrahim Barhoum. The guy who they wanted to kill was Ismail Barhoum. They claimed that Ismail Barhoum, this 56-year-old Hamas politician, had been hiding in the hospital for weeks planning terrorist attacks. Well, that raises a few questions. Number one, why did I never see him? Like you said, like you implied, there are no locked doors. There are no hidden places anywhere at Nasser Medical Complex. No one ever told me, oh, don't go there. It wouldn't be right. Or no, nothing like that. Nothing like that ever happened. And I went wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And everybody knew that I was the American who likes to take pictures of random things. Not that I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Arab, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even Muslim. So Hamas probably wouldn't trust me very much. But it also raises the question, why during a ceasefire was he hiding in a hospital? Does that make any sense? All the other Hamas people were just walking around freely doing whatever they wanted. Why is this one guy hiding in a hospital? Any time, and I say this and people don't believe me, they think I'm exaggerating, but literally any time anything can be verified about what Israel says about Hamas using human shields in general and hospitals and ambulances specifically, it's proven to be false every single time. Just a few days ago, or just yesterday, maybe they said they claimed they found a tunnel under a European hospital. Okay, yeah, it could theoretically be true. I don't see why it couldn't be true, but it's hardly a reason that it does not justify destroying an entire hospital, forcibly evacuating it, and blowing it up. That's completely and utterly ridiculous.
Sure, I mean, that would be like taking down an airliner because there was one person on board that, you didn't think should be alive and all the other passengers die. I just want to ask you, I mean, that sounds like it might answer my next question, but what is the biggest misconception about what's happening in Gaza that you hear parroted time and time again in the media or by spokespeople for different governments? What would you say is the biggest misconception that, based on all your experience and everything you've seen, makes precisely no sense?
I guess there's a few, but I think really the biggest one is just that the paradigm itself is wrong. I don't know how Al Arabiya reports on it, but in the Western press, everything is presented as the Israel-Hamas war. That's completely incorrect. There is no. The only people who seem to be trying to fight a war in Gaza are the Palestinian militants. The Israeli military is just attacking the civilian population. There's that's very easy to see. I'm kind of surprised that this kind of silly idea persists that the Israelis are fighting a war in Gaza. The Israelis seem to be doing everything they can to avoid Hamas in Gaza and other Palestinian armed groups. It's ridiculous. All they're doing is killing people by bombing from the air and shooting from afar. And they seem to be making absolutely no distinction between militants and everybody else. So yeah, I would say that's the difference. I mean, it's just not a war on Hamas. It's just, it's been described as genocidal, and I don't see any reason to think that the hundreds of genocide scholars and international legal scholars and other such people, the two founders of Human Rights Watch, other such people who've come to such conclusions and know much better than I would. I don't see any reason to think that they're wrong about that. And a genocide is not a war. It's just an extermination.
You briefed the UN Security Council last week, I believe, and you told them firsthand about what you'd seen, what you'd experienced. I wonder what you wanted them to take away from that briefing, and what did they take away with it from your briefing? And as an extension of that question, did you get people trying to discredit you or threaten you afterwards for having said what you said?
I think actually what I wanted them to realize is exactly what you just asked me about. What's the biggest misconception? Actually, everything I've written about Gaza since I've come back has been to try and undermine this perception that the Israelis, and I shouldn't say the Israelis, that the U.S. and Israel are fighting a war, meaning trying to defeat some military objective in Gaza. That's just not what's going on. They're just attacking the civilian population. And that was the purpose of me pointing out, like at the Security Council, I pointed out that about half of my patients were seriously injured children. I never once saw a combatant in Gaza. I never treated a combatant in Gaza. That the entire population is being starved, that the entire population is being unbelievably psychologically traumatized. Like I said, it's just not. Because there's no doubt that innocent people got killed in Germany when we were bombing it, right? Like in World War II. No doubt about that. But this is just something very, very different from that, and people have to understand that. I think the people, there's a reason the U.S. ambassador wasn't there, because she didn't want to have to listen to what I had to say. That's perfectly obvious. That's pathetic and embarrassing, in my opinion. I was shocked to see that she was not there. And if you can tell me the last time an American physician testified as to crimes committed with American weapons by an American ally at the Security Council, I'd love to know about it. I'm pretty sure that's never happened before. And if it has, and the ambassador didn't show up, I mean, that is shocking behavior. So it's pretty obvious. I think what my point is I think everybody on the council who wanted to hear what I had to say already knew. Now, Danon, the Israeli ambassador, who's, I won't comment on him, but he was literally on his phone through my entire speech. So, I mean, which again, I don't really care, because I think he already knows exactly what's going on.
Why do you think he was on his, why was he on his phone, do you think? What do you read into that?
Honestly, I think it's just kind of a way of expressing contempt. If he wanted, I'm sure he wasn't actually doing anything on his phone. He was just pretending to scroll through things. It's just, I honestly think it's just a way of expressing contempt for not only for me, but for the United Nations, for the Palestinians generally. I was sitting next to the Palestinian ambassador, Ambassador Mansour. And just expressing contempt for the proceedings in general. Furthermore, you could kind of get it from his own remarks. Just the only thing he did was he sat there and said, "I'm revealing for the first time how the UN is intimidating private NGOs into not working with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I continue to call Tom Fletcher an anti-Semite. All this kind of just bizarre nonsense." It's just this. It's kind of the same way South Africa was acting at the end of the apartheid era, when they were just constantly screaming about how everyone is anti-white and just loves terrorists. It's just silliness. Okay. But as to whether or not anybody has threatened me, actually, no. I'm very lucky in that way. I don't know why I don't receive threats about this, because everybody else I know that works in this space does. But no, actually, I haven't. So grateful for that.
We're almost out of time. Just a couple of questions I want to ask you very quickly, Dr. Sidwa. If you could spend 30 seconds talking to President Trump. I know you've already been critical of President Biden. You've written that open letter to him when he was still in office. What would you say to President Trump?
I would just say that you can stop this Donald Trump campaigned on what he called ending forever wars. And I don't agree with Donald Trump on very much, but I certainly agree on that. Well, let's end this one. All you got to do is, you don't have to attack anybody. You don't even have to make a deal. You can just stop sending the bombs. It's very, very easy. It won't threaten Israel's security one bit.
And just coming back to you, I just want to know how you're doing, how your experience in Gaza has changed you, how it's changed perhaps your worldview, your way of working. What do you think the answer to that is?
I learned a lot, just from a technical standpoint. I learned a lot in Gaza, but really, I have to say the thing I really learned the most was we all know that we're lucky to live in the West, from a material standpoint, a freedom standpoint, things like that. But to see what my healthcare colleagues go through in Palestine, especially in Gaza, is humbling. But it also reminds me of how much responsibility we have. We can't just sit around and wait, especially the United States. We are the reason Israel is able to do these things to people. It's not an Israeli attack on Gaza. It's a U.S., British, German, and Israeli attack on Gaza. And we just need to stop participating in crimes so that my colleagues can get back to treating people in their hospitals, instead of moving their families around in tents and dodging gunfire.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. American trauma surgeon, Dr. Feroz Sidwa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Well, my guest today is Francesca Albanese, who is the UN's Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. She was the first woman to be appointed to this position in May 2022. Then, 17 months later, we all know what happened on the 7th of October 2023. Well, her role as the UN's Special Rapporteur has just been renewed, extending her mandate until April 2028. Francesca Albanese, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just first of all, how do you see your role? What does it entail as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So as a Special Rapporteur of the United Nations, I am appointed by the member states of the UN sitting in the Human Rights Council to monitor, document, and report on the human rights violations taking place in the occupied Palestinian territory, so the territory that Israel has occupied for 57 years now. The Gaza Strip is Jerusalem and the West Bank. And I would have to produce 2 reports per year after visiting the occupied Palestinian territory, but I am prevented from doing so by Israel.
Okay, we're going to talk a bit more about that, and we're also going to talk about your latest report in just a moment. But I just want to ask you to cast your mind back to the 7th of October 2023. You were in that position already, as I said in the introduction. What went through your mind as that news broke?
It was a horrible, horrible day, because there was enormous violence against the Israelis. It was quite new as a scene, and it was shocking all the more. And so it was a day of very strong feelings, a day of revolt inside, because I didn't know how I would do this, I would continue to do this job. But it took me a few hours to come back to senses and realize that this event, this violent event, was the product of over 70 years of violence and depredation of Palestine and the Palestinians, and it had to be resolved as soon as possible. This was the opportunity to go and resolve the root causes of all violence in the land between the river and the sea, which is an illegal occupation turned into apartheid, and unfortunately now escalating into a genocide.
Okay, we're going to talk about some of those legal definitions in a moment, like genocide, because I know you have a legal background. But I just want to ask you before that, we were saying in the introduction your mandate has just been renewed. Obviously, in Israel, not everyone is happy about that. We heard Danon, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, saying, quote, "The renewal of Francesca Albanese's mandate is a disgrace and a moral stain on the United Nations. Albanese is a notorious anti-Semite who has repeatedly expressed not only biased views against Israel, but also hateful rhetoric targeting the Jewish people as a whole." I'm sure you saw that. What do you say to that?
No, I didn't. I hadn't seen it. But, I've been receiving these attacks since even before becoming a special rapporteur. First of all, the real disgrace for the United Nations is that there are 60,000 people who have been killed in 20 months, and Gaza has been turned into a meat grinder, and it continues under our eyes. And while member states starts uttering words of condemnation while trading with one hand in weapons and trading with goods and with the other. So this is the real disgrace. Then Francesca Albanese being an anti-Semite, not really. Criticism of the state of Israel is all the more necessary given the crimes that it commits institutionally and structurally against the Palestinians. It's not my fault. It's a fact, and it's a responsibility I have from the United Nations. Then the weaponization of anti-Semitism is vile, because anti-Semitism exists. It's real as Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism, but weaponizing it to justify crimes against a virtually defenseless populations, it's really ludicrous.
You talk about the current reality in Gaza, and we've been reporting extensively on that here on Al Arabiya. We heard an official at the ICRC describing the situation there as worse than hell. Is that roughly how you view the situation there?
Yeah, I think. Look, again, I've not set foot in Gaza in the last years, but I've had my eyes and ears on Gaza for over 600 days, and it's been horrible. I really don't understand how we keep functioning with all what we have seen, which is not just, and I'm not saying just in order to downplay what I'm saying, but I've seen on the one hand the brutality, unleashed against the Palestinians as a people in all its forms. It's been really vicious. But on the other hand, I've also collected evidence on the people who have done it. And the executioners of this genocide are really young people and young Israelis, and who have been turned into political pawns in an ideological war in order to gain what? Land. It's all about the land.
And as you said at the beginning, this is a land that you're not able to visit. And I'm just assuming that in your capacity as a special rapporteur, that must be extremely frustrating for you, isn't it?
Well, what is frustrating is the fact that this is a situation that is not new. This has been ongoing the occupation has been ongoing for 57 years during which Israel has been allowed to build colonies after colonies, which are a war crime, to forcibly displace the Palestinians, which amounts to a crimes against humanity, in perpetuity, without ever being accountable. This is frustrating. It's also frustrating to see member states condemning but not following suit with words, and we know why, because Israel is so entangled in our economy through the United States, but not only. It's very difficult to disentangle Israel from the purchase of weapons that takes place from India to Europe, and from the financial interests that are connected to this. It has very much to do with profits. This is frustrating. And of course, it's also frustrating to see member states that nowadays the best thing they can come up with is the two-state solution. What an affront to the Palestinians who are dying. What an affront to the Israelis who have died. What an affront to those who really want peace and know that peace cannot happen without full respect of human rights of everyone and keep on talking about a political process that they don't even believe in, because we know that many European countries are not ready to recognize the state of Palestine. They're just ready to put money on the capacity building of the Palestinian Authority, which means kicking the can in the air in perpetuity. So this is what is really frustrating for me.
Are there any historical parallels that you can draw in your mind to what's happening in Gaza right now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't think that this is, to understand this, what is happening to the Palestinians, one needs to understand what 500 years of colonialism, of European-led colonialism have done to the world. Millions of people have been genocided from Australia, Canada, the United States. What we call liberal democracies today are all countries birthed from genocides of indigenous people, controlling the land, controlling the resources, displacing the indigenous, replacing them with the settlers. It's so different from what's happening to Palestine. What is shocking is that it's happening in 2025. We have had 70 years plus of international human rights system, and again, the international law is as strong as the will of states to implement it. And it's clear today that, again, commercial interests come before the life of people. But if I have to think of a parallel as well, as a European, I'm very, I was brought up with a lesson learned, what we thought were the lesson learned from the Holocaust that we committed, from the genocide that we committed in our own land, on our own European soil. The Jewish people, together with the Roma and Sinti, and together with the disabled people, were exterminated because they were the other, compared to the idea of the pure race. That was not something that traveled across some crazy people with something like the Nazis. It's something that was tolerated by the society, because the Jewish people were our brothers and sisters taken away from our cities, kicked out of civil life through regular laws. In my country, we kicked out the Jewish people of ordinary civil life with the racial laws, preventing them to take part on civil life, to work in universities, in hospitals, etc. This is how genocide starts. It doesn't. We fail to understand that genocide is not about the means, the concentration camps, rather than the machetes. Genocide is the intentional destruction of a people as such. And what we have done to the Jewish people reminds me of what is happening today to the Palestinians, starving them, torturing them, raping them to death, while everyone is watching. Everyone is watching, from Europe to the United States to the Arab region. And is it possible that no one, 191 member states, other than the United States and Israel, 191 member states cannot stop it altogether?
You raised some interesting points, and I wanted to get back to the word genocide, because you've used it on a number of occasions already, just a few short minutes into this interview. I want to ask you, you've got this background as a legal scholar, and I'd like to ask you what legal basis supports this claim that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, just in terms of the label and the terminology. Talk us through that.
Yeah. First of all, had we had this interview in March or April or May 2024, I would understand your question, because back then I was pretty much a lone voice together with other special rapporteurs talking of genocide. But today there seems to be a growing consensus about that. The Commission of Inquiry on Israel-Palestine of the UN recognized acts of genocide. The Special Committee of the UN on Israeli practices has recognized that Israel is committing genocide. Amnesty International has produced a 300-page report saying that Israel is committing genocide. Forensic Architecture has provided a 800-page report documenting the cartography of a genocide. There are Israeli genocide Holocaust scholars who are saying that we cannot avoid the reality that Israel is committing genocide. So let me unpack it. What constitutes genocide is explained at Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, which refers to the genocide is the intentional destruction of a group as such. And the Palestinians are a group as such who's been recognized at risk of genocide already by the International Court of Justice in January 2024. Israel has been ordered measure to stop its genocidal acts that could be genocidal, like acts of killing, infliction of severe bodily and mental harm, like torture or sadism against the targeted group, or creation of conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction among the group, or the prevention of birth, like destroying the fertility clinic. So this is what constitutes genocide. Israel has received provisional measures ordered by the ICJ in January, in March, in May. There have been resolutions calling for a ceasefire already in June last year. Nothing has stopped. The thing is that how can you miss the genocidal intent when it has been declared, said, there have been called for destruction of Gaza, not uninvolved civilians, there is no one innocent, even the children are involved. There has been an increasing upfront call to kill kids in Gaza. And it's not just that they've said it. They've done it. Israel has the most sophisticated, one of the most sophisticated armies in the world. So every missile it launches, it's for a purpose. And the reason why this attack on Gaza has been totally disproportionate, totally indiscriminate, totally in disregard of the principle of proportionality of military action, has turned Gaza has pulverized Gaza. So Gaza has been destroyed. And one response for genocide, not just for the actions, but for the omissions. So this is not just the responsibility, in my view, of two members of the government who are now wanted, one current, one past, who are wanted by the ICC for crimes against humanity and war crimes, which can well coexist in a genocidal climate, in a genocidal spectrum. Okay. But what have the other members of the government done? Supported it? What have the members of the parliament done? Encouraging the raping of Palestinians in jail, the killing of children. And what has the judiciary done? What is the population, the majority population in Israel doing while a minority protests against it? So again, I don't know what else does Israel need to do to be found guilty of genocide. Okay,
so let me ask you this. Who, in your opinion, bears the greatest responsibility for the humanitarian catastrophe which we can see on our screens in Gaza? Does it rest with one person, or to whom do you attribute full responsibility?
No, I don't think, as I said, it doesn't rest with one person. Genocide is a collective endeavor. It's never an act, it's a process. And indeed, my deepest regret as a special rapporteur is that I had been alerted already in 2023 by some Israeli Holocaust studies scholars that the situation was included precursors of genocide. Had I been as knowledgeable as I am now on genocide, I would have totally sided with them. Instead, I ignored that. But what Israel was doing to the Palestinians, the extrajudicial killings without accountability ever, the forced displacement, the segregation, the mass incarceration, the dehumanization against the Palestinians was one of the extreme. So the responsibility for it rests first and foremost with Israel. With Israel as a state, there is no question about that. And it's just, unfortunately, it takes time for people to come around and realize what they're doing. We have never been good at complying with that with that obligation in the Genocide Convention, that is to prevent genocide. How do you prevent genocide if people deny that? Even when there was the ICJ even when there was an ICJ set of provisional measures saying Israel risks to be committing genocide, or there is a plausible risk of irreparable harm for the Palestinians under the Genocide Convention, no one really halted the transfer of weapons. No one really imposed the sanctions on Israel. So you see, it's an whole system. It looks like a joint criminal enterprise. Of course, there are states who are very responsible, like the United States, and of course, its responsibility should be assessed on a judicial level. But at the same time, other states, what are they doing? There are states who are continuing to provide weapons, and they should be their governments should be investigated for complicity with genocide as soon as possible.
Now, it's reported that you have been targeted because you're outspoken. We can hear that. You've got strong opinions and you're extremely passionate about this cause. Tell us about those threats and the fact that you've been targeted. Who's targeted you and what form have the threats taken?
I push back on the fact that I have strong opinions and I'm passionate. First, because they're both incorrect. They're both mischaracterization. I don't have strong opinions. I have a strong sense of what is international law, and I take seriously the commitment to serve the Human Rights Council as I've been requested. The sense I don't have a cause. I'm not committed to a cause at all. I mean, I've never engaged on the question of Palestine as an activist. Yes, I've dealt with the question of Palestinian refugees, Palestinian forced displacement, but I didn't know as much as I do know now on Palestine itself, like the occupied Palestinian territory. Even if I've lived there, I've been there serving UNRWA and serving Palestinian refugees. So the thing is that I'm not passionate. I am disgusted. This is what I am, by the failure of the international system for which I, like many, have given really my best years. I've really believed in it and I want it to work. So it's quite different.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Because of being firm, objective, and speaking with integrity, I'm threatened. Yes, but like many.
But tell me about the threats that you faced. I wanted to ask you specifically because it's reported that you have been threatened for expressing the opinions you express and for doing the work you do. Just tell us about that.
I think it's pretty obvious, the fact that I'm accused of being an anti-Semite, while on the other hand, having the support, the appreciation, really there is a cocoon of Jewish organizations, Jewish scholars, Jewish people around me. So this has been a real source of strength for me from the very beginning of my mandate. But being accused of as an anti-Semite, as a European, with the past I have, with the sense of consciousness that I have of what we have done, what is our past, it's very heavy. So this has been, or saying that I'm a pro-terror, that I've incited terrorism against Israel, or saying that I have not condemned the crimes that have been committed against Israelis on October 7. These are pure lies, or that I've taken money. I'm doing what I'm doing as a volunteer. I've even put my teaching and my work aside to deal with this, because genocide is something as enormous as anything I've ever done. So because of this, I do receive threats. There are individual threats that have come my way, in various means. And then there are the threats coming from member states who create a violent environment against me, because they really point at me like an evil person, and this is a situation. This is incitement to violence against me. I've arrived to the United States, and for days there were billboards in Times Square and other places with my face, and I was accused of being an anti-Semite or a pro-terrorist, And again, it's very heavy, but at the same time, what can I do? This is what everyone, from students to faculty members to journalists to activists, this is what everyone daring to criticize Israel and the system that today is covering up for Israel has to endure.
So I take the point, and you face threats and harsh words, and I can imagine that can be frightening as well. And I'm wondering if it puts you off. But there are people, obviously, large numbers of people who support what you're doing. What do Palestinians say when they meet you? What sort of things do they say to you?
Thank you. And so it's quite emotional because I understand. I mean, I feel sorry for them that they need internationals to speak about what they're enduring, because they have a strong voice. They are an incredible, noble people, and strongly intellectually from our point of view, and they have been the victims of our misery. Our human misery. I mean, what the Palestinians are enduring speak to our failure, not to theirs. Speak to our lack of humanity, not to theirs. No, absolutely. There is a total outpour of love wherever I go. So this is why I'm saying, yes, the threats are there, and I don't want to talk too much about that because I don't want to give even more ideas to people to become vile toward me and. Let's say my private life, there is so much love. Where I live in Tunisia, where I travel to other Arab countries, or in Europe, wherever I go, there are people really crying when they see me, which is pretty astonishing. But this is the reality. It's a time that has broken many souls.
Yeah, I wonder how history is going to look back on this chapter. But just to wrap up our conversation, what's your message to world leaders right now?
Why are you doing that? It's not yours. The planet is not yours. The world is not yours. Try to think that you're not going to be here for a long time. This is what I would say to the world leaders, knowing that they wouldn't care much. What I feel like doing is sending a message to those who are not traditional leaders, like those who do not control armaments, do not control huge capitals, who do not control algorithms, and have only to lose if they stay in this watching passive mode in the time of a genocide. Yes, as you say, how will history look at us? The point is not how history will look at us. How can we look at ourselves in the mirror when another people is really losing everything? It's time to sacrifice a little bit of our time, a little bit of our comfort in order for these people not to be completely annihilated. But also, if we think that what's happening to the Palestinians is going to be limited to the Palestinians, we're really naive. Our societies will be next.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. We've had some powerful testimony on the situation in Gaza. Also, we've found out about what happened in the waters off Gaza, in international waters 185 kilometers away from Gaza there, with that flotilla intercepted by the Israeli military. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.